best nest. Mr. Bird was happy. He was so happy he had to sing. This was Mr. Bird's song. I love my house, I love my nest, in all the words my nest is best. That's what he sang. Then Mrs. Bird came out of the house. It's not the best nest, she said.
That's not very nice.
No. I'm tired of this old place, said Mrs. Bird. I hate it. Let's look for a new place right now.
That's not nice either.
So they left the old place and to look for a new one. This place looks nice, said Mr. Bird. Let's move in here. But somebody else had already moved in.
Who is
A raccoon. So they looked at another house. This one looks nice, said Mr. Bird. And there's nobody in it. So what shoe they're going to live in? Make it their house. Right? Let's see. You're wrong, said Mrs. Bird. This house belongs to a foot.
who's that for?
I don't know just what that is. I was trying to get pages. Maybe you can help me. There. So they went on looking. I like this one, said Mr. Bird. It has a pretty red flag on the roof. I've always wanted a house with a flag, said Mrs. Bird. Maybe this place will be all right. But it was not all right. I guess I made a mistake, said Mr. Bird. In came the mail. You make too many mistakes, said Mrs. Bird. I'm going to pick the next house. And here it is, right here. On the top of the building. They flew in. They looked around. Isn't it too big? Said Mr. Bird. I like this big place, said Mrs. Bird. This is the place to build our new nest. They went right to work. They needed many things to build their nest. They first got some hay. They got some soda straws and broom straws, and they got some sweater strings. They got some horse hair, and they got some man hair.
I found that house.
Soon they had all the hay, all the straw, all the string, all the stuffing, all the horse hair, all the man hair they could carry. They took it all back to build their nest. Mr. and Mrs. Bird worked very hard. It took them all the rest of the morning to finish the nest. This nest is really the best, said Mrs. Bird. I want to stay here forever.
Yes.
Mr. Bird was very happy too. He flew to the top of the house. He sang his song. I love our house, I love our nest, in all the world our nest is best. So, he was so busy singing, he didn't even see Mr. Parker coming. He just kept singing. Every day at 12 o'clock, Mr. Parker came to the church. Mr. Parker came to pull on a rope. The rope went up to the bird's new nest. The rope rang the big bell right under Mrs. Bird's nest. Boom, boom. Bong! Mrs. Bird got out of there as fast as she could fly. Bong! Bong! When Mr. Bird came in, all he could see was a mess of hay and string and stuffing and horsehair and manhair and straws. Where was Mrs. Bird? I will look for her until I find her, said Mr. Bird. He looked high, he looked low, he looked everywhere for Mrs. Bird. He looked down into the chimney, but Mrs. Bird wasn't there. He looked down into the water barrel, but Mrs. Bird wasn't there. There he saw a big fat cat. There was a big fat smile on that fat cat's face. There was some pretty brown feathers near that fat cat's mouth. Mr. Bird began to cry. Oh dear, he cried. This big fat cat has eaten Mrs. Bird. Mr. Bird flew off. I'll never see Mrs. Bird again, he cried. I was getting dark and it began to rain, and it rained harder and harder, and Mr. Bird could not see where he was going. Crash! Mr. Bird bumped into something.
Sign.
Let's see what he bumped into. Mr. Bird went in. Whoops, wait. It was an old house. That old house that Mrs. Bird hated. I'll go inside, said Mr. Bird. I'll rest until the rain stops. Mr. Bird went in, and there was Mrs. Bird.